Hello, my name is Amelia, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through the Bell Labs Innovation Lab. So, if you've ever used a smartphone, congratulations, you live in a world that Bell Labs helped invent. Let's go to the History tab. So, I'm not going to go over every single date, but let's just go briefly through. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell's telephone launches the communication revolution. Scrolling down to 1925 to 1984 is when Bell Labs produces an insane list of breakthroughs that I'll go into more depth later. In 1947, the transistor was born. In 1984 is when AT&T broke up, which ended the monopoly that had been funding years of long-term research. After a couple of mergers, Nokia acquires the lab in 2016. Moving on to great inventions, you'll see a list of Bell Labs innovations across electronics, computing, communications, math, and physics. The important thing to note here is that Bell Labs created both physical inventions as well as entire fields of studies that we still build on today. On to great minds. This tab highlights some of the famous names you may have seen in textbooks, like Claude Shannon in information theory, Bardeen, Brattain, and Shockley for the transistor, Dennis Ritchie and Ken Thompson for C and Unix, Richard Hamming for error correcting codes, Harry Nyquist for sampling theory, and Penzias and Wilson for discovering the cosmic microwave background. And before we move on, I do need to stop and say something about this page. As you may have noticed, everyone listed here is a man, and I think the historical context behind that really matters. Think about what it took to be the person who gets to be called a creator, inventor, or discoverer. You had to be way up high in the hierarchy, and in this case, the lab head. And to be the lab head, you needed a PhD, a faculty appointment, and a hiring committee that would actually take you seriously. Every one of those was a gate, and women got filtered out at each one. I'd say that Grace Hopper is a great example of a person who got to sidestep those gates. She helped build some of the earliest computers, and she invented the first compiler. The thing that lets us write software in something closer to human language instead of raw machine code. She also drove the development of COBOL, a programming language that ran business and government systems for decades, and some of it is still running today. And a big reason she got to do that work is because she was a US Navy Rear Admiral. So her rank and title allowed her opportunities that most universities and companies at that time just wouldn't have handed a woman. So when I look at this list, I'm not doubting that these men were brilliant or that they did real work because I'm sure they worked their butt off. The point that I'm trying to make is just highlighting who was allowed in the room in the first place. And that's the part that most textbooks leave out. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. So, moving on to Nobel Prizes, you'll see that Bell Labs was essentially a Nobel Prize factory, and for good reason. Bell Labs became one of the most decorated industrial labs ever, which, I mean, you could read more about in this section here. Moving on to the everyday technologies that we use, this tab takes your phone and breaks it down to its smaller components. The processor inside is built from billions of transistors. The camera uses digital image sensor technology that traces back to the CCD. The apps in cloud rely on Unix-style operating systems and C family languages. Wireless connectivity uses cellular and signal processing concepts. The internet itself relies on information theory for reliable communication, and the physical backbone, which are fiber networks, depend on lasers and optical communications. So, Bell Labs is fundamentally embedded in the daily tech stack you use all the time. Moving on to Bell Labs and AI. So, this chain right here is composed of a hardware side and a software side, something you can read more about if you're interested. And here, is there an innovation formula? Because why did Bell Labs work so well? Well, there was a few key ingredients like long-term funding, freedom to explore, cross-disciplinary teams that worked side by side, a mission centered on improving communication and scale and infrastructure. Down here, this table compares and contrasts the Bell Labs model with today's innovation model. All it really shows is that the structure around research shapes what kind of breakthroughs we get. And for the Bell Labs family tree, this is a visual narrative that highlights some of the descendants that found success from the innovations that came out of Bell Labs. For the Innovation Lab, here you get to go through each of these inventions and read more about their problems, the innovation, companies that use the technology, the AI connection, the fintech connection, and the future outlook. And then finally, here in the Knowledge Center, you can go through the glossary or the key terms just to review so that you can take the quiz to check your understanding. Awesome. So that's Bell Labs, a place where phone lines eventually turned into the transistor, the internet, and the machine you're watching this on. Thanks for watching. Until next time.